Okay, so let's talk about the 4 types of sentences. So there are 4 basic types. We have simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. So let's start with a simple. Basically, with a simple sentence, you have a subject and a verb, an object sometimes, or a complement sometimes. You can also have some modifying phrases, but they're not necessary. Here's an example. At noon on Tuesday during the summer, Joe shoots at kittens and puppies with his bow and arrow. So the sentence is about Joe, he's the subject, and he shoots is the verb. Okay, all the rest are complements and objects of the sentence. What does Joe shoot at? Kittens and puppies with his bow and arrow, etc. So if you only have one subject and one verb, then you generally have a simple sentence. Phrases can also often be placed either at the beginning or at the end of a sentence, depending on how direct the writer wants to be. So that is prepositional phrase, at noon on Tuesday. Okay, and then during the summer, these are all phrases that can be added before or after the subject and the verb. Here's another example. With or without makeup, jewelry, or expensive clothes, Joan, subject, always looks is the verb, like a zombie. Okay, the object is like a zombie, and then we have some phrases that will begin before the subject and verb. But these are basically simple sentences. Now, a compound sentence takes 2 simple sentences and join them together with a conjunction. Okay, and our conjunctions are and, or, nor, but, yet, so, for, however, therefore, nevertheless, otherwise, consequently. All right, so these are different kinds of conjunctions here. You're probably familiar with the very fanboys ones that are there. We'll talk about these other ones here in a second. Here's an example. Joe works. Joe is the subject. He works is the verb. Okay, Joe works at a manure factory downtown, and his wife, Joan, subject, works in a perfume factory nearby. You can see that the 2 subject-verb simple sentences, subject-verb, are separated by a comma and a conjunction. And that's how we combine 2 simple sentences together with a comma and a conjunction. If you leave out the conjunction, you have a run-on. If you leave out the comma, you have a run-on. And you'll see the big R-O. All right, another example. Sarah saves $5. Sarah is the subject, saves is the verb. And then she would have no money. So she, subject, would have is the verb, and no money is the object. So join these 2 together, but this time we're joining it together with a semicolon, a conjunctive adverb, and a comma. All right, so in formal writing, compound sentences require either a comma before, and, or, nor, but, yet, so, for, or a semicolon before, however, therefore, nevertheless, otherwise, and consequently. So keep in mind that there's a semicolon that goes before it and a comma after it. Semicolon before, therefore, comma after, just like otherwise here. Okay, so now that we know what a simple sentence is and a compound sentence is, let's go back before we talk about the other 2 types and talk about run-on sentences. So we get a run-on sentence when we combine 2 simple sentences together without the correct punctuation and conjunctions. So here's an example. Bill is our subject. Broke is a verb. Bill broke his arm. It has given him a lot of trouble. So here, it is also a subject, and then has given is the verb. So you can see that there's no punctuation in between the 2, so it's a run-on sentence. So what we can do to correct it is just simply add a period. Bill broke his arm, period. It has given him a lot of trouble, period. We have 2 sentences, 2 simple sentences. All right, so most run-ons are the result of comma fault. So that is what we also call a comma splice. And basically you're adding a comma, but you're not adding the conjunction. So you're adding a comma instead of a period. So here's an example of that. Cynthia has a new dress, comma. Cynthia is a subject. Has is a verb. It is a subject. Is blue is the verb. Okay, so Cynthia has a new dress, comma. It is blue and white. And that would be a comma splice. So instead of a comma, just add a period. Cynthia has a new dress, period. It is blue and white. Okay, so that's the basic way to correct a run-on sentence. But a lot of times you can combine these sentences and make them compound sentences. And that is what we were talking about earlier when we talked about compound sentences. You just add a comma and a conjunction. So Cynthia has a new dress, comma, and it is blue and white. So let's talk quickly about ways to avoid run-ons. So if you have two or more subjects that are closely related, it is usually a good idea to join them in one sentence. So there are 3 ways to join sentences correctly. So you can use a comma and a coordinating conjunction, which is what we talked about earlier. This summer I can work at Kroger's, comma, or I can be a lifeguard. So I, subject, can work, the verb. I, subject, can be, verb in between, comma and a conjunction. You can also use a semicolon in place of the comma and a conjunction. So Donna, subject, has decided, verb, which job to take, semicolon. She, subject, will work in the bank. So instead of using a comma and a conjunction, we're using a semicolon. And then lastly, we could use a semicolon and a conjunctive adverb. Those were those words that we were talking about before. However, nevertheless. So we, subject, ate a big lunch, semicolon, nevertheless, comma. Okay, all 3 are necessary. We, subject, we're hungry. Okay, so we separate 2 simple sentences with a comma, conjunctive adverb, and a comma. However is the most commonly used conjunctive adverb. Okay, so when you see however in the middle, check to see if there's a subject verb on this side and a subject verb on this side. And if that's the case, you need a semicolon before it and a comma after it. So let's practice with a couple of these. So we're going to correct these. Mother went to the antique show. She bought a handsome rocking chair. I can't even read. All right, so we have mother went, she bought. In between those 2 is just a comma. Boo, that's a comma splice. So you need a conjunction, right? So we can say mother went to the antique show, and comma, and she bought a handsome rocking chair. That is no longer a run-on sentence. So remember, a comma splice, or as this handout was calling it, what do they call it? Comma fault. It's the same thing. Okay, comma splice and comma fault are the same thing. And so they also are considered run-on sentences. So we won't go on vacation until August. We're ready to go right now. Yeah. Okay, so right there is 2 separate sentences. We need a comma or a conjunction, comma and a conjunction, or a semicolon, or a comma and a conjunctive adverb. I'm just going to use a semicolon there. Boom, that works. So come on over to our house. We'd like to see you. Uh-oh, just a comma. Come on over to our house. I would put a period there, which you remember was our first option. And then make sure you capitalize we. Sarah missed her bus. Consequently, she was late. Uh-oh, so we have one of these fancy conjunctive adverbs, but we have a subject, we have a verb, we have a subject, we have a verb. So in the middle, there should be a semicolon, conjunctive adverb, and a comma. All right, let's do one more. It's been a cold spring, hence we're behind in our gardening. Okay, again, we have a fancy conjunction in the middle there, and we want to make sure we use a semicolon to separate that. All right, so you can practice on your own, but look at your own writing and see if you have subject verbs subject verb multiple in your sentences.